Let's do it.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to welcome Greta Hardin from the History of American Food podcast and also the perennial favorite, Jamie Lewis. How you doing today, guys?
Yo!
I'm excited.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Greta, the viewers are already pretty well acquainted with Jamie and developed a solid love-hate relationship. So can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I pretty much have lived in the Pacific Northwest most of my life. I did a little bit of wandering around post-college when I was teaching. I've always been interested in science. My degree was in biology. I taught chemistry for a long time. Then I discovered that your chemistry education is actually an over-specialized culinary degree. So I've just always been into food and realized, wait, it can do this, but I'm a history junkie too. So during the pandemic, I was like, okay, I want to know more, and nobody has the right podcast, so I will make the right podcast.
Yeah, and I've been really enjoying the podcast that you do together with the prize fighters, gangsters, and circus freaks. And I really recommend everyone to check it out, and I'm going to put it in the show notes.
Thanks.
But in one of your recent Shogun episodes...
The pacing, though, Greta's show is paced so well, and her voice is so pleasant that, you can just go listening to her. It is soothing. You learn while you're being soothed. It's amazing. It's like she's rubbing your back and telling you about food history.
I was binge listening to it one episode after another, not for research purposes or anything like that. I mean, I enjoyed listening to the content, obviously, but it almost sounded like you two were speaking from a really well-rehearsed script because you were so simpatico with the way that you spoke and dialed off each other. Because sometimes I get on the podcast with Jamie, I feel like I'm punch drunk half the time, and he has to drag me kicking and screaming through the episode. But you two just had this.
I'm used to dealing with middle schoolers, so I'm ready for Jamie.
Oh my God!
I know. I was wondering how that pairing even happened because I sort of thought, how do these two even get together? Because they're like literally chalk and cheese, black and white, so opposite ends of the spectrum.
It's true. It's more, Jamie reached out and has said, hey, I have this really crazy idea. And, my life had contracted so much at that point that I was like, I don't know, it might be up for a really crazy idea. What do you want to do?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you did. Yeah, excellent. But in one of your recent Shogun podcast episodes, you mentioned that the study of food history is essential to the understanding a complex jigsaw puzzle of history. But can you explain what value the study of food history offers to the curious meathead wanting to expand their knowledge?
So for me, it was really food history gives a lot of the why and how to how civilizations are put together. What's their major starch? And how do they, sort of orient their society around it? What's luxury? And does it come from within the society or does it come from without? And America's really funny because for us, we weren't really sort of starch focused. We were sugar focused and meat, sugar and meat. And we're kind of ecstatic about starch because we've got 4 biggies. We've got wheat, corn, rice, and French fries.
Yes, the ever-present potato food group.
It's true, but fried potatoes, not just potatoes, fried potatoes.
Well, if you're going to eat a potato, why wouldn't you fry it? I mean, it's really the only way to eat a potato, isn't it? Well, there's also mashed potatoes. Those are the two really best prepared way. Yeah, are you more of a mashed potatoes person?
I'm just saying you can't leave them out.
Oh, no, with the skin too. Because otherwise that's just monstrous.
This is complete tangent, but you've just mentioned fried potatoes. I've always wondered about how did the pairing of burger and fries even come together?
That's in my future. That's something that happens in the middle of the 19th century and I'm just right at the very beginning. But I think it has to do with refrigeration and transport and the fact that potatoes you can just hang out. You don't need to worry about them until they'll just sit there. They don't need to be refrigerated or anything. So they're handy. They're nice.
But French fries, they're Belgian, right? Isn't that a Belgian dish originally?
Frying potatoes, I think it's one of those things that happened a couple of times. But yeah, the Belgians have it. But I think just the American Southern tradition of frying things in hog fat sort of made that a natural thing as well. Yeah. So I think it's sort of something that happened a couple of times and it just made sense. Besides, fried potatoes. Delicious.
Yes. Yes.
And that's all that's really important.
Yeah, so Jamie, you've also mentioned food quite regularly in your blog, the 13, 15 years that's been up. Why do you think that food history is really important to us meatheads wanting to learn a little bit more about our own training or just expand our own historical knowledge?
Well, so a lot of people have really fallen to thinking that they're like somehow inferior to their grandpa or their great grandpa, and they can't handle things as well, and they're weak, and they're this and they're that, and so they excuse like their shitty physiques because they're saying that well, I'm just not as good as my dad, and it is they didn't work as hard, and also if you look at the food that they ate, it's different than the food we ate. And then it's also much smaller portions. And then when you go back another generation, it goes smaller portions. And then they got times of famine where there's wars and there's depressions and there's this and there's that and there's food crops going out and there's just like shit happened where people couldn't eat. And so you go back further and then it's like more of those happen and they're more often. And I think the rule was like every 6 years you're going to get a famine.
Yeah, even biblically they talk about I think every 7 years.
Yeah, oh, okay. I didn't know that. I'm not as steeped in the Bible as you.
Hey, you can't have food history without like reading some Bible, man, because there's just no getting away from it.
Holy shit. Ezekiel bread is the most disgusting thing that has ever been served to human beings and called food. Oh my God, fuck those.
No. There is much worse. Calm down.
Oh, I'm sure there is much worse. But that shit should be, I mean, those people should be in prison. They should be in prison.
That's one of my upcoming questions, actually, about like which of the foods are the worst tasting that you've ever tried. But Ezekiel bread, okay, I'll give that a try sometime.
Also, cow shit was one of the ingredients in the biblical Ezekiel bread, and I think they leave that out of the new shit. So they're missing a lot of nutrition there. Second harvest.
They might also be talking about that it was essential. Like, be sure you use the cow shit to fertilize your field. Dum dum.
Oh, well. I don't know. Again, I'm not as steeped in the Bible as you are.
If we could jump in the time machine and go even back way before biblical times, we've had like recently, I don't know, this trend of several historians, most notably the guy that wrote Sapiens, that Yuval Harari, and many of them have stated that the agricultural revolution was one of history's biggest mistakes. And they said that when we moved from being a hunter-gatherer existence to farming crops, we completely changed our way of life. And we traded what was a relatively comfortable existence as a hunter-gatherer to something really miserable where were tied to the land. And it was like the plants domesticated us rather than the other way around. Do you think it's like a fair estimation that that was the case with the agricultural revolution, or has it done more good for society in terms of the overall picture?
Okay, first of all, agriculture was not the error. Being dicks to people was the error. I mean,
there was no fucking revolution. This happened over millennia. I mean, my God, humans have existed since we branched off from chimpanzees. Hominins are humans. And so we've been like domesticating, like changing the world around us since we started fucking not being chimps. So the idea that there was an agricultural revolution is nonsense. But anyway, Greta, go ahead.
Yeah. But I mean, the whole way that they're talking about it, like, oh, this is this big error. I mean, this is a history squashing, oversimplified, reductionist bullshit, Western facing, patriarchal, white boy, elitist view of the whole thing.
There it is. There it is.
Tell us more.
All right.
So, I mean, really, first of all, you want to ask these guys, like, hey, you want to go back to being a hunter-gatherer? Because, first of all, hunter-gatherer societies tend not to be literate or have much in the way of, like, written language. So they have no cushy university career. They also tend not to have cloth. They tend not to have grandmas and grandpas. But really, my biggest beef with these guys is they're talking about one style of agriculture mainly focused around using agriculture as a wealth generation tool. And when you look at agriculture that way, yeah, a shit ton of people suffer. But I mean, first of all, it's like, how do you define agriculture? Do you just talk about it like I'm tending plants to get them to grow better for me? Then people have been doing agriculture for way longer than this whole like Mesopotamia culture, cradle of civilization stuff.
Yeah, I think maybe the lens that they were looking at it through was settling down on a patch of land and abandoning maybe like the nomadic practices that they might have been involved in before as hunter-gatherers, where they moved from spot to spot following the food supply around. Because I just think about from the Australian perspective, like with the, say, like the Aboriginal Indigenous people here, they never really entered any farming per se on a particular plot of land. They would move around through their area throughout the state following the seasonal food rotations. And they did so for like 40 to 50,000 years until the Europeans came along and all of a sudden, wanted to try to farm.
You can't go there, and you can't go there, and you can't go there, and you have to stay here.
But Tasmania was heavily under, like, it was cultivated.
Yeah.
They discovered that only recently, but they thought it was a wild land. But no, it turns out it was really heavily cultivated, and they had very, very good agricultural yields. So
yeah. I mean, you think about like most hunter-gatherer societies actually do cultivate the crops that they visit in the rotation. They protect it from incursion from other plants. They, will sort of spread it out in a more favorable location. They'll even do pruning. They'll do seedling planting. Just this idea where they're thinking of like one big starch crop. But that usually only happens when you create that pyramidal society where you've got just like a couple of really rich people at the top who are collecting taxes. And then you have just a shit ton of poor suffering peasants at the bottom. Whereas you look at other agricultural societies with this sort of non-wealth generation focus, and you get like, okay, we communally own this land, and the riches of our society is that everybody's okay. And
you had that. Yeah, the Harappans had equally sized houses. The Mayans, there were a lot of different societies where they were centrally planned communities that had like functioning and advanced sewer systems with water filtration systems.
Aquaculture,
yeah, and
salt making.
Precisely. I mean, it was everything but electricity. It was basically like Fred Flintstone land, and they lived well. But it's popped up a couple of times, and this is one of the other times that it's happened where everybody's eating for a little while.
Yeah, I think that 1987 Jared Diamond essay that he wrote was practically trolling.
Guns, Germs, and Steel?
Oh, no. He has a 1987 essay where he talks about like agriculture was man's biggest mistake. And it's just like a little essay. I'm like, was he trolling? Because
you might have come up in a book when in high school. I don't know, I used to get read to the kids quite often was that Ishmael. I don't know if you was kind of postulated the same thesis about agriculture being the worst thing in terms of humans.
Okay.
Yeah, Daniel Quinn, I think his name was. He had a series of books. Do you remember him? No.
So in the 1970s, this started happening. There was a guy named Dr. Weston Price who wrote some books that everybody then started like copying as their own and saying that agriculture was the root of all evil. And it was due to him. He was a dentist and he was looking through people's teeth and he found fewer dental caries in indigenous people. It was a bunch of bullshit. But again, it's back to what Greta said. What was that rant again? Because I know you got it written down. Because it is that shit. And I know like people don't want to hear that shit.
No, it's a particular form of agriculture that sucks. Agriculture itself is pretty awesome. It's sort of like people are like, oh, well, canned food's bad for you. Fresh food's better. I'm like, canned food's a goddamn miracle. And let me tell you why.
Luckily, there's I don't know if do you guys have the History Channel in Australia?
We have an amalgamation of it, but yeah, I don't think
it's literally just guys in safari hats punching kangaroos. But so we've got TV shows on like the history of food and things like that. Do you have that in Australia?
I'm not a big TV guy, so I probably wouldn't be the best to speak to that. But yeah, go on.
Anyway, I feel like at least Americans are getting educated about the history of food and the mechanization of food and with stuff that Greta really loves because the mechanization of food is really important. Like the way people used to refrigerate meat back in the time that everybody wants to live in a Paleolithic time, they would take their meat and tie a rope around it and drop it in a lake.
Yeah, or bury it, or there are a lot of different options. Some of them are actually pretty cool, especially when you get into the tropical regions. They figured out ways of sort of like fat sealing stuff. and sort of smoking and fat sealing it. Yeah. So you think about like the conservas and confit and stuff like that, where you have like a fat cap over the top. Like that's another way to do it. So it just takes a lot of fat, which is expensive.
Just another part on the agricultural, I wouldn't call it a revolution now, but
yeah,
like with people that were more hunter-gatherer based, and I know I even hate using that term because, I mean, what does that even mean, hunter-gatherer? It could be a myriad of different permutations, correct? But do you think the composition of the food that they ate in terms of their health changed significantly when we just went to more grains or monocrop crops, or just, you know, just like some of the plants that we grew on land? Because obviously, I don't know, but do you think they didn't get as much meat, or there was just that balance?
The lack of diversity definitely has affected us. I mean, you look at like, once you start transporting food places, you're going to reduce the variety, just because a lot of stuff doesn't last. But also, if you're filling up a train car or even a cart, you just like want to have a whole bunch of food there right then. And so you start reducing down to like what you can all get at the same time, what's going to stand up to the transportation, what's going to stand up to the storage. And so, yeah, I mean, again, agriculture didn't reduce our access to a variety, sort of making it a profitable thing, and all the transportation reduced our variety.
And I'd like to add to that, because I actually had a cookbook from the 1940s with me for last week to talk about food history, because I wanted to demonstrate how weird the food was in 1950 or 1940 or 1950, whatever the cookbook was from. Because not only were they eating like quail, and like there were recipes for animals I've never even heard of in this thing, like snipe and like, I don't know, I'm just making shit up, but like there were crazy ass animals, and this was just a regular ass cookbook. But like the recipes were for things I've never heard of before, and some of them had hilarious names that, like, one of them seemed so unbelievably racist that I was like, I can't even believe this is in a book, but it had nothing to do with race. It was just, it had a lot of like loaded racial terms in the name. It was very strange. Yeah.
Which actually brings me into my next topic about a bodybuilder's favorite macronutrient, which is protein. And just something from my own curiosity, which kind of piqued this question, was I've always wondered why our current kind of domesticated food sources of animals like pigs, cows, chickens became the go-to food sources, while other animals such like horses, like pheasants and kangaroos, for just to put it in
That's a great question.
They will cooperate. I mean, there are just animals that are.
But so will dogs.
Yeah,
like dogs will cooperate.
Right. Well, and that's the funny thing. There are plenty of societies that herded and ate horses. It's just Western peoples have like feelings about horses.
That's actually how people started domesticating horses, was because they were herding them to eat them, and then they realized, oh shit, I can sit on this thing. Yeah. But yeah.
Or actually, I think it's sort of like multiple streams happen. The first thing people did was they hunted horses, because they're large and they're a nice big source of meat, and they don't have pointy claws.
Most kangaroos would have jumped the fence as well if they tried to hem them in. But it's quite a like a gourmet meat these days. I remember they used to sell kangaroo when I was young, but it was like dog food. Now they sell kangaroos in the stores, and it's high priced, you know, fashionable meat to eat. But
it's very lean.
It's very gamey. Yeah. Good to have on a diet.
And I'm saying this as a cat lover. I'm surprised still that you guys aren't eating cats in Australia, because they have such a horrific cat problem. It's like, at some point, it's like, well, you're just wasting meat. But like, and the cats are huge down there. The wild,
everybody agrees around the world, no matter how like dedicated hunter-gatherer they are, cats taste terrible.
Oh, do they? Okay, I had it in a heavily sauced dish in China, because I was like, you're better off being eaten in China. So
yeah, no.
Didn't the Japanese used to make their shamsian guitars out of cat intestines or something like that?
Maybe the whole cat gut thing. Maybe I can't remember if
and
sometimes it's true, or it's like a weird.
They made
I don't know.
features out of cat gut too.
Again, like I can't remember if that's real or like that's a
they just
or something. It might be true.
Gotcha.
I don't know. Yeah.
I wonder
Yeah,
also
well,
how
doctors were uniformly horrible back in the day, so I wouldn't be surprised.
I also wonder how pork kind of made its way into the mix, because the other meats kind of have a consistency of taste about them. When then pork kind of comes in from this oblique angle, and it's just like, this tastes nothing like the other meats.
Again, it's a cooperative thing.
The cooperative thing.
But also pigs are incredibly fertile. So there's just like lots of pigs around to eat. And unlike horses don't have pointy claws, pigs are terrifying and dangerous. So you're going to be killing them anyway. And you cook it up and you're like, wow, that smells delicious.
Yeah, that smells like bacon.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there are just lots of pigs around, and like you kill the wolves, taste terrible, great coats. Pigs, terrible jackets, but until they got the tanning thing, but they taste delicious. So they're like, you know what? We'd like to keep those ones around.
And I suppose rabbits are just as prolific as well. But apparently, if you eat too much rabbit meat, you die or something. Because
no, it's if you only eat the meat, and it's just called rabbit starvation because people were just eating lean rabbit.
Right. Yeah, it's without any source of carbohydrates or fat. So it's like, you know how some people instinctively as a bodybuilder go to try to do a low fat keto diet. That's where you get the rabbit starvation coming in.
Yeah.
So
yeah. It's almost like a protein spare modified fast. You can only do it for like 2 to 4 weeks, remember, and then your body basically taps out. So
yeah.
But I do want to remind everybody that that really what everybody was eating, especially, so there were multiple societies around the world, but the one that spawned like the Phoenicians and things like that was in Turkey. They founded it around a freshwater source that was right next to the ocean, and they had tons of oysters. And they were just eating snot from the sea all day long, and they used the shells for all kinds of stuff. And but their community was literally based around this freshwater and the oysters. And so that was really like the primary source of protein for a lot of people. And Greta, can you please explain that further?
First of all, I'm sorry you hate oysters, but you don't just have to be so mean to them all the time. They are delicious when properly prepared, and I'm sorry you've had so many traumatic experiences with them. But no,
well, I didn't see you slurping them up when we had lunch at the market. You were just like Reading Terminal. You were like, no, I'm going to go anywhere but at the oyster bar, which was open.
Philly is not the oyster capital of the world for me. I'm going to eat them at the coast where they just pulled them out of the sea. I'm snobby that way.
We got the Delaware River. It's delicious. Delaware River oysters.
I said to Jamie, he's the only one that doesn't like oysters because everybody else, loves them at a buffet or whatnot. But I suppose he doesn't need any help in the aphrodisiac department there. But I noticed that even Sandow for breakfast would have oysters. So you're 100% right, because I just checked out Sandow's diet the other day, just doing a little bit of research for this particular episode. And I was thinking, oh, shit, there's the oysters that Jamie was talking about for breakfast.
And that man was doing a lot of fucking, so he needed those oysters. He was a male prostitute. He had a boyfriend. He was getting it in.
No, I mean,
so he made his money.
Yeah, basically, oysters were doing pretty okay on the East Coast until the railroad and canning came along, and then we just started mining oysters and shipping them wholesale into the center of the country. They're like, yes, we have brought New York oysters to California, where they had their own oysters. But yeah,
and they were dumping toxic waste into the oyster beds, and I mean, they were doing everything they could to murder oysters. And oysters were free coming out of the ground, but the people in New York were not allowed to eat them if they were poor. You couldn't just go into the ocean and eat an oyster. It was against the law, which doesn't make any sense, but it was wild.
And I think part of that law was that cholera outbreaks were coming from the local New York City oysters, and then
the slime pits, oyster slime pits.
Yeah,
I still don't know what it is, and I refuse to look it up because honestly, I had to pick up a puke slug up off the carpet before we started, and I can't with the oysters. Not in a slime pit.
Went up and dug the source that the dollop guys got that slime pit oyster thingy from, and part of it makes me think that it was some like, oh, big cities are nasty kind of propaganda that people were typically writing in their journals. Because yeah, I mean, there might be
yellow
something
journalism
to it.
gets me.
Yeah, but people are always like, they eat oysters and eat garlic in the cities. Yeah.
Oh, that's another funny thing is, so not only do we eat way more food than people did back then, and I've talked about how much bigger the chickens are now than they were in 1950. It's basically doubled in size. But Greta, tell everybody how little garlic you would use in a dish now, or back then, like because it was 1900 or something that you told me that recipe, right?
Okay, so like for a long time, it was sort of like if you were rich, you had nutmeg and cinnamon and ginger and all these things like imported from abroad. But if you're just like a real poor person, no nutmeg for you. That's pricey. So people were still looking for stuff to season their food. And so poor people could grow onions and garlic and parsley and whatnot in their yard. And so it was like, oh, I can't eat onions. I can't eat garlic because, it'll affect my breath and my health and unbalance my humors and make me spell poor. And so the early 20th century, like people are like, but garlic is good. And so like there are these Southern recipes where it's like a quarter teaspoon of garlic powder, serve 6.
A quarter teaspoon of garlic powder would not be enough for a single chicken breast. It's not enough garlic. There needs to be. That's the one thing the Russians got right, and it's what they got mocked and ridiculed about their cuisine because it was all garlic and onions. I mean, it's not
radishes
either.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Beets.
I remember like back in the 2000s when everything that came around was was rebranded as superfood. So the flavor of the week was garlic, and so like then I would get 8 cloves of garlic and add it to all my dishes, just cut it all up and dice it up. But yeah, it's quarter of a teaspoon. It's fascinating.
Pungent foods and garlic and and all those foods, they are so good for you. Spicy foods, garlic, anything that like tingles your tongue is really good for you.
Greta, another one of the trends that's been really popular for maybe the last 15 to 20 years in bodybuilding is intermittent fasting. And now it's kind of made its way more into the mainstream over time.
Every single fucking AI ad in the middle of every single article I read anywhere.
Jamie hates these guys who are always saying, I eat breakfast. But
they're advertising it as something good because the AMA literally just put out studies that were like, it gives you heart disease. It's unequivocal that intermittent fasting gives you heart disease. They haven't figured out how, but they're like, it just does. And but everybody's like, yeah, do it. I don't understand. Are they selling bulletproof coffee again?
I don't know. But some of those intermittent fasting studies studying people's eating habits is super fucking hard because people lie, but then they also just don't remember. Like, was it Tuesday? I don't remember. But no, I think the reason intermittent fasting is so like popular right now is everybody's like tried everything else and it doesn't seem to be working. So they're going to advertise intermittent fasting and it's the perfect thing to sell classes on or build your following on because you don't have to deliver anybody anything. And if it's not working, it's you as the user's fault. You're doing it wrong.
Yep.
And
charlatans out working hard.
But I mean, it like the whole thing you're asking, like, hey, didn't people used to do this all the time? And for a certain amount, like, yeah, true. The big change in sort of American-led food culture is the snacking culture, where like there are plenty of societies where they sort of like snack kind of all day and have like one meal, which is fine. Like that works for people too. But this whole thing, like it used to be a big fucking pain in the ass to make a meal. So you just sort of ate something cold in the morning and then you'd have a big ass meal in the middle of the day. And then you just sort of have part of that leftovers as dinner and then probably as breakfast the next day. Just because making like starting with animals and plants and turning them into food was so much work. Like you just did it once a day.
Pull feathers out of a chicken. Like you had to kill a chicken, then you had to pull the feathers out. Yeah, like oh my god! And then you had to make a fire, which takes fucking forever to get it going, and then it's the right heat, and then my god, it's just too much hassle. I would have just started.
To that point, what were the convenience or the fast foods of antiquity then? Like if they just wanted like a snack on the go, what would they go for?
Pies. Like people would make a bunch of pies, and those were good. Like old school pies. The crust wasn't edible. It was just a shell that like kept everything nice on the inside. There's sort of the wheat-based pies of Europe, but there's like a style of tamale that you just like hard bake the crust on the outside and then you break it open and there's like the goodies on the inside. Yeah. And then you would have in more tropical regions, that's where they were figuring out some of like the fat solidification. You would like heat something up inside of a tightly wrapped leaf and then the fat would sort of make a seal on the inside. There are a bunch of ways to do it, or like clay. There's this cool method they have in like the mountainous regions of Afghanistan and everything, where they would seal stuff inside of clay, and just no air would get in, and so it'd keep stuff fresh that way. So those would kind of be the convenience foods: cheeses, yogurts, stuff like that. But and during the summer and fall, when there's like plenty of stuff just hanging from the trees and the bushes, that's your convenience food there.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because we always kind of were fed the rhetoric, particularly from guys like Ori what's his name? Ori Heflick.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, got his name.
Ori Hoffman. Yeah, Hoffman.
Yeah, the guy that wrote the Warrior Diet. That he knows a lot of traditions they didn't eat throughout the day. They basically went about their business and soldiering and whatnot, and then they had that one big communal meal at night quite often, which was their largest meal of the day. So, yeah, it's funny how like a whole niche is spawned from that.
He was a cartoonist for Playboy. So while it was a fun book and I appreciated it and it gave me a lot of great ideas for how to write, let's not get too carried away that he was some kind of historian and his work was in any way like historically accurate. He was good with the Greeks and Romans, but beyond that, I mean, the Greeks and Romans were basically the same society. The Romans were just the Greeks part two, and so they were just adopting the same culture because they had no culture themselves. So like he just studied one group of people and how they ate. Everybody else was eating, there were different people eating different ways all around the world because different indigenous people have different indigenous foods. So, but they were in the 19th century, they were eating out all the time because people couldn't cook at home. And Greta, could you explain that a little more?
It definitely depended on whether you were urban or rural. And this is the same in densely populated cities of antiquity. You're not going to be like lighting your stew pot fire inside your Mesopotamian high-rise or your Roman high-rise. Like, everybody's going to die.
Yeah.
That's why, like in like the ruins of Pompeii, there's all those little tavernas and stuff. So anytime you have an urban setting and you don't want people cooking in their very flammable buildings, this whole sort of streetcar tavern culture develops. And so in 19th century urban cities, you had like oyster cellars and banana cellars and coffee houses, and the whole lunch counter thing developed out of that too. I have a whole idea that diner culture is actually based on Dutch food traditions. So,
I was going to guess that it was Parisian food traditions from the 19th century because they had that cafe culture, but Dutch.
But the actual food that you find in American diners, I think, is based on our Dutch history.
Oh, interesting. See, and then I've only been in Greek diners. So I think on the East Coast they're all Greek.
It's true. And somehow the Greeks are always serving you French fries.
They give you French fries with your Yodo.
Yeah.
Jamie once wrote an article series about the dietary practices of various ancient warrior cultures around the world, and particularly the role that stews and soups played in their physical strength and resilience. So what was it?
Greta and I are working on a book together.
That was my next follow-up question. Yeah.
But
what was it about stews that appealed to so many food cultures globally, and what can we learn from some of their ancient eating traditions?
So the first piece of advice from all of that, before I get into stews, get yourself a damn pressure cooker, because stews rock. They allow you to get a lot of inaccessible nutrients. And so that's a lot of like the whole iron pot culture of developing American cuisine, is you are able to just get stuff out of bones, out of cartilage, out of collagen that just like wasn't accessible. And then there's a lot of vegetables that don't give up the goodies until you cook them. So yeah, like
we don't have the ability to break down cellulose, and all these assholes eating raw food.
Kale.
Oh my God, they're not getting any nutrition from that, and then they're eating raw meat. And I have one of my clients right now when I was on, he ate raw salmon on a plane. Oh my God, I would have followed him to his car and strangled him to death in the parking lot. But
have it like in like a little Ziploc bag or something.
I have no earthly idea. But he was eating raw steak and raw fish on a plane. And the reason why we cook our meat is because that helps break down the meat so that you can eat it more easily, because it is such a pain in the ass to chew raw meat. Like, it is disadvantageous to eat raw meat. Yeah, and it's stupid, and you look like a dickhead. But Greta, can you please explain further why eating raw foods is so stupid? Because God, that pisses me off so much.
Sean, did you want to get something else in there first?
No, not at all. I'm just laughing along. Don't worry about me.
Okay, so the big one is, and this is the secret everybody's trying to tell you, but you won't listen. It's the opposite of what they won't tell you, is that we don't actually use most proteins whole that we ingest. Our body goes in and like breaks them down into all of their little Lego pieces and then reassembles them into the stuff that we can actually use. And so when you're eating raw meat, yeah, all of those proteins are still whole and they haven't been denatured. They're in their like strongest, like, I'm not going to break up form. And so, yeah, you're totally robbing yourself of nutrition. And this is like, people bag on plant protein all the time. It's like, oh, well, it doesn't have to make protein. I'm like, it has all the same amino acid plus a bonus one. So get out there, eat your mushrooms, eat your lentils, eat your beans, and cook your damn greens all the way.
Yes, so that you can actually get the nutrition. Although, my God, an overcooked green bean is a crime against humanity.
Oh,
it is.
Well, eat those suckers raw. They're delicious.
Well, little butter and garlic.
I'm just saying, if you go get a tiny little fresh green bean, off the vine, it is like a very special flavor. But yeah, don't ever cook those. Yeah.
But there's Kerrygold in my fridge that is just screaming out to be laid gloriously atop that green bean, along with a great deal of garlic. So
is this what the new book that you're both working on together is all about? The kind of the development of the steroids theories, and what else is the book going to contain that you're writing?
Well, at this point, it's just the steroids thing, and we're gonna
concept.
Yeah, it's a concept, but Greta's going to be reworking the recipes, right?
I was gonna say what Jamie has done a really good job of is sort of plucking out sort of major stew traditions from all over the globe, and then we need to go through and make them accessible to the Western eater. But honestly, page 1, go get a pressure cooker, because yes, these were all traditionally cooked in a big pot over a fire for hours and hours and hours, but that's not good for the planet. And just a pressure cooker is so much more efficient with energy and your time, quite frankly.
Also, imagine the lung cancer they must have had from all the smoke inhalation.
Long enough to get good lung cancer. That's the least of their problems. They're gonna die of lung first.
Oh my God! And that's another thing. We got all these assholes running around in gyms in bare feet. So they're in because the barefoot thing is back. The Vibram 5 fingers haven't come back, thankfully, but. Yeah, and so we got all these dickheads running around with bare feet, and that's how you get hookworm, ringworm. Every parasite you could possibly get comes in through your fucking feet, unless you eat it. So, I mean, my God, just put on some shoes.
Not to mention, we've all at one time dropped a 45-pound plate,
Yes.
Gently.
Yes. And I used to wear like in wrestling, we wore our wrestling shoes into the gym, like at wrestling camp, and that was the only time we wore our wrestling shoes outside of the gym. But I've dropped a 5-pound plate on my shoe or on my foot while wearing wrestling shoes, and I never wear fucking wrestling shoes anywhere but in the like on the mat again, because if there's no protection for your foot, it's just
I was gonna say those are like special grippy socks, basically.
Yeah. I might as well just smash my own toe with a hammer.
Yeah.
Save the time.
Oh, it's sort of like there's like this weird thing, and people are like, "Oh, I'm not gonna wear steel-toe boots because if it smashes it, then like it cuts off your toe." I'm like, dude, if you drop something on there that's able to do that to a steel toe on a steel-toe boot, you got bigger problems.
Yeah.
I agree. On the topic of books as well, why do you think that diet books are eternally bestsellers or just so popular? Because they basically amount to just one common theme: eat less and do more. But yet they always seem to be the front runners in terms of the bestsellers list. So why do you think they never lose their popularity, even today?
People are dreamers. Well, I mean, and here's the thing: like, we have never had so much calorie and nutrient dense food that required so little effort out of us. And I mean, for a long time, the only way you were going to survive is if your body was pretty damn efficient with your calories. And so most of the people who had like naturally high metabolism, like, were the first to die. But it's like, this is the whole thing that gets me with the Ozempic. That just like makes it so you want to eat less. But I'm like, but food is delicious. I love food. Why would you want to like purposely like eat like these tiny little mouse meals?
And everybody has bone loss after they're on it for a while. And women are taking it after the age of 40, and they're already suffering from bone loss. Their bones are just going to fucking disintegrate. They're just going to burst into powder at some point. It's so irresponsible that they're doing this. And now Weight Watchers is selling that shit, and Oprah is selling it. Those people are psychotic. It's like they have no souls. I don't understand it. I don't understand how you can poison people.
It's going to be fen all over again. No, this whole idea that like virtue equals thinness. I mean, it's the whole thing. Like, wait, didn't being fat used to be a status symbol, and now it's like, like fatness is bad? And there's like a whole bunch of stuff going on there. But the point at which it like flipped over was when people started working indoors at like factory jobs or whatever. And so it used to be like, oh, you're like a laborer outdoors. You can go to like the big muscles. We were kind of talking about this in Warrior, that like you're tan and you get the big muscles. And I am a languid, pale, noodle-wristed aristocrat. And so, they weren't working up these big muscles. And then when you got off the farm and you had all these people sort of working indoors in these terrible conditions for like 18-hour days, being fed these horrible company meals, like
on 5-minute lunch breaks, apparently Jamie once wrote.
Right. Yeah. And so they were, becoming sort of pudgy and pasty and pale. And so now if I'm a rich person, I can go out and take up rowing outside where I get muscly and tan.
And a lot of that had to do with the fact that they were all studying the classics like really heavily in school. And the Greeks were very serious about the fact that your outer beauty reflected your inner beauty. So if you looked like shit on the outside, you were shit on the inside. And those guys were very serious about, not letting the pores make them look bad. So
infanticide, if you were a little bit defective.
Or a little bit female. off the crazy.
You wrote in one of the articles one time that related to the whole topic of being rich and being a bitch at the same time, that a corpulent man was an opulent man, because like we were saying, we had this status symbol that if you were overweight, then you were obviously well-to-do. But when did that whole mindset change, and all of a sudden, being fat, became more of a signifier of your poverty or your lack of education rather than being a high social status symbol?
Basically, when it became harder to become thin, then it was to be fat. I mean,
so this is
whatever,
fashion, basically.
1950s through the 1970s in the United States. I don't know what it was for you guys, but because they had to get through all of the economic depressions of the early 1900s in the United States and worldwide. Like from 1904 to 1929, I don't know how many Great Depressions there were, but the Great Depression was only one of them. So like
sort of
they
like
were
the last biggie.
Yeah, it was it was it was what do they call it at the end of the fireworks? What is the finale? Yeah, it was the finale. Yeah. So like these people had been starving. And like, so the poorer you were, I think that's when they started calling people fat cats, because they were like the only fucking people you saw were fat, were people you knew for a fact were shitty, thieving bastards. So not only were they like rubbing it in your face that you're poor, but they were like, it was extra because they had their fucking gut hanging out of their shirt. So.
I mean, there's always like the whole Puritan thing. Like, it's much more so in America. Like, because they were like, oh, those Catholic jerks, you know, getting fat off of the poor, you know, we're more pure of heart, and, you know, we're not a bunch of like fat sitting around priests. So we have the bonus like Puritan crazy in our makeup as well.
You guys have evangelical Christianity down in Australia too, right? You guys have that nutty church that Justin Bieber's a part of.
No, not to the extent that you guys have. We've always been pretty a-religious. Like the Pope even referred to us as the least religious country on earth. So we've always kind of held religion with a little bit of disdain, even though that was, Christianity minus the muscularity part was a pretty big part of my childhood growing up. So that probably explains why I'm so straight-laced, but
there you go. All right.
But no more. I was going to also talk about bodybuilders' mindset when it came to eating, because most bodybuilders' diet tend to be pretty like boring, bland. The whole chicken, rice, broccoli, chicken, rice, broccoli on rotation again and again throughout, the weeks, has pretty much become the mainstay. It's all about fueling the machine, which is the mindset. But Jamie wrote in his recipe book that if it tastes like shit, you'll lift like shit, because your unhappy belly creates a weak body. So can you comment on why being so austere with our eating habits is not only unnecessary, but possibly derailing our efforts in the gym?
I mean, my meanest take is learn how to fucking cook, you lazy bastards.
Because here's the thing. You can, Greta, if a guy can cook a badass meal, but he's not that good looking, you might give him a shot, like as a lady, right? Yeah. He's a nice
bring the
guy
oysters also.
Yeah, but he's a nice guy who can cook. That you got a lot of points right there. So learn one dish, your date dish, and it has to be something that women like to eat. So, I mean, if you learn how to make a bang of mac and cheese, you will win.
Yeah. I mean, think about it through history. All of the people who have advocated like not eating or not eating interesting foods because it's sinful somehow. And I mean, in some ways, bodybuilding can really be a religion. These guys are nasty, boring, fucking bastards. Like, they just suck the joy out of your life. And so it's sort of like, okay, so if, one of the places that you find joy in your life is bodybuilding, God, I hope so, if you're dedicating that much time to it. But like, you do have to eat to fuel the machine. So why make yourself miserable about it? I mean, like all of these like Huel drinks and whatever that are just like, no, don't waste time on food preparation. I'm like, this is like, if you don't eat, you'll die. So why do you want to do it in the most joyless way possible? Like, what the hell? I mean,
well, and also, I listened to this NPR podcast a few years ago about this person who lost their sense of taste entirely, and it was killing them. They were horribly depressed because your vagus nerve is attached to your tongue, and so if you're not tasting things or you're eating bland food, you will make yourself depressed. And that's kind of where I was going with. And then you're going to lift like shit because you feel like shit, because you have not made your mouth happy. Like Twizzlers make your mouth happy. I don't know if they make you lift well, but they definitely taste good.
Yeah, it's sort of like you have this opportunity to have this like nice part of your day eating something tasty, and there's so much out there that's delicious and like fulfills your needs. Like I realize when people are like setting up for competitions and they have like really like careful balancing that they want to do, and they're going to eat like a super strict diet to meet certain goals. Sure, fine, whatever. I used to row lightweight, even though I was almost 6 feet tall.
But that doesn't mean you have to limit your spices, because these people will not season their food. They will eat a unseasoned boiled chicken breast. Unseasoned boiled chicken breast. I won't even speak to a person who tells me they've eaten those things, but it is a thing that happens all the time. Why would you boil a chicken breast? My God.
It should make chicken broth with the rest of the chicken, maybe?
And throw the fucking breast that you used out, because nobody should eat that.
No, you chop it up small and you make chicken salad out of it, and it's delicious. Or you shred it and you put it in chicken soup with the broth. It's delicious, that you season properly.
Yes, yes. There's a great deal of seasoning that goes into it. But seasonings do not have any caloric load, nor if they're spicy, they actually increase your metabolism. And so that is a very valuable thing. So it behooves you to like add more spice. And the idea that limiting your salt is going to change your physique in some significant way is absurd. Unless
plenty of water.
Yeah, unless you are a woman who is like near her period, in which case water retention becomes a big problem. But I mean, women have different water retention issues that go throughout the month. I can't speak to all of them because I'm not a woman. But salt affects women more than men. But for men, you can eat salt. You're going to be all right. All the old school guys did.
Yeah, I get there are plenty of people that like food isn't like that important to them. And so I'm not saying like, oh, you have to make like every bite a gourmet bite. But yeah, just like have a week of like chicken marinades or seasonings to go in there. Put a little chili flake on your broccoli. Try some different rice mixes. Like it's not that hard. Like even just get like really high quality, tasty rice. Like basmati rice is really fragrant and delicious, and you barely need to do a damn thing to it. Really high quality jasmine rice just like has the scent that comes off it that makes you go, oh, this is delicious food. I mean,
and like you said, it's so easy these days with pressure cookers, etc. You know, you throw the ingredients in a pot, you set it to boil or whatever, and you come back and you've got, you know, a week's full of, or a few days full of meals prepared for you. So yeah, these guys, I think the whole
stew, because it's so, I mean, it's so easy. You know how many portions are in there, so it's easy for you to portion out if you want to. I mean, stew is the easiest goddamn thing in the world, and the meat distributions even throughout, provided you can use a knife.
Just drop a steak in there.
Yeah, like stew is so easy that I love meat pies because they're kind of nature's, like our original protein bar, and like I love jerky too. But like stew is so fucking easy. You can just throw it in a pot and forget about it, or you can do a hunter stew where you just keep your crock pot going at all times. And I love it when people message me and they're like, "I've had a hunter stew going for 3 months." And I'm like, that's insane, but congratulations. Like
keep that temperature up, man.
But it happens.
Did you want to tell us a little bit about, because I didn't even know about the perpetual stew, hunter stew concept until I read into your blog a little bit. Did you want to tell us quickly a little bit of the history behind that?
Well, Greta would know it better than I would. She is the food historian.
Yeah, like the original, like when Jamie's like lighting a fire is a fucking pain in the ass. And so, yeah, you just always keep like a low like supply of coals in the back of your fireplace. And if you've got this little low supply of coals in the back of your fireplace, you might as well be cooking something over it. And, you know, people would, you know, get one of the 87 different birds that were common to eat in North America back in the day. And so you just, you know, like toss the bones in there and they would sort of help make the broth richer. You would put maybe like just little scraps of meat in there, you know, little scraps of vegetables, leftover bread or grain from breakfast. And some of them sucked. Like they were bad. But if you had a skilled cook who sort of had a sense for this, you know, you could sort of balance it out. And so it was always sort of like this rich, tasty stew. And so actually that having that that pot in the back of the fireplace, and then as stoves developed, having it sort of on the back of the stove, that was actually one of the other fast foods. You'd go in and you just get like a cup of this broth and like a piece of stale bread, and you'd like soak the bread till it was edible again. And like that would be a fast food if you had sort of a communal kitchen or a village kitchen, or just like a big house with a kitchen kind of situation.
Oh, that's right. So they didn't have spoons. So they were just eating the chunks out with a fork and then drinking the broth.
Oh, no fork. Like either spoon.
Oh, no fork.
Spoon. Oh, no, forks. Forks are new, man.
Oh, okay.
And so it would either be just like with your fingers, or spoons are actually pretty common. Or, you know, in Asian countries, everybody, you know, chopsticks. Everybody's got chopsticks. Same thing.
I think another one of the huge misconceptions these days is that everybody thinks that their grandfathers or their great-grandfathers' era of food supply was this gilded age where it was all macrobiotic and natural and pure, and they lived on such nutritious fare. Can we touch on, like, if we were to go back, say, 100 years or 200 years and have our forebears' diets, what shocks would people encounter?
Food poisoning. Food shortages. This cheese has worms in it. Would you like it?
Milk supply.
Depending on when, either none or the formaldehyde flavored.
Or there was milk that would get you drunk too. There was also that.
Yeah,
yes.
but
they had swill milk in New York City. So
no, that wouldn't get you drunk so much. It would just had no nutrients in it.
Oh, okay. Well,
you know, swill milk was when you would take the spent grain from the brewery, because all of like the nutrients would go into the beer, and so it'd just be like the husks and the like not really nutrition. They'd feed that to the cows, so you had these poor starving cows.
Yellow journalism got me again. Slime pits and milk that'll get you drunk. These goddamn New York journalists can't keep a fucking story straight.
Hey, TikTok. It's more interesting to talk about the milk that'll get you drunk. We can talk about the milk that'll get you drunk if we want to go to Mongolia, but
just on the topic of alcohol, I think just on the topic of alcohol in general, it was a lot more prodigious in times gone by. I mean, I remember your article, the Empire Builder series, Jamie. You were talking about how these guys were 3 sheets to the wind before lunchtime even rolled around. They were cut and pissed out of their brains. But I always kind of wondered, you know, again, I don't know whether this is a misconception, so please clear it up if it's wrong, but people always refer to people back in our grandfathers' or forebears' age as being bigger, stronger, more virile, and more robust. And the people of today are like degenerated by comparison. But I think, how are they so virile, robust, and strong if they were eating such shitty food? Or was that in spite of eating such shitty food?
They weren't. Number one, their penises were smaller. And they were smaller by such a significant amount that there's actually World Health reports that are talking about the alarming increase in penis size and the health risk that it poses to women. So, number one, they had little dicks. 2, they were all so underfed that 40% of them couldn't make it into the army.
I just want to clarify. Are you saying that penis size is increasing?
It is increasing at an alarming rate, is what the World Health Organization says.
Oh, we got ripped off.
It is a health problem. So, yeah.
When was this report?
It came out this year. And it was multiple times it hit my newsfeed. And I was like, this is amazing. And nobody's talking about it. I did a little video, but nobody saw it.
Isn't it a misprint? And they're just saying that guys are becoming bigger dicks?
Oh, my God, what happened?
That's constant throughout history. There's just the amount of dickishness is just keeps getting redistributed, but I'm pretty sure it's constant.
Well, I don't know. So the Harappans had 900 years without war, and I think that's due in part to the fact that there were no horses. So it's a long walk to another place, and you have a lot of time to reconsider it. Like, well, you know, nobody's tending my sheep right now, and also my crops are dying, and this is fucking stupid. And now we all have dysentery, so I got shit running down my legs. Like, I'm not going to walk the next 3 weeks.
I could have just stayed home and drank beer.
Yeah, and got laid. This is stupid. I'm not going to do it. And they just turned the fuck around, I guess, because they had no war. So
how were they so industrious when they were drunk all the time? How are they such hard workers? You know, like lumberjacks and guys working the railroad, and everything was such manual labor back then.
Well, okay, so Jamie does tend to exaggerate a little.
I am hyperbole is the best. I just want to say, for the record, hyperbole is the best. Well, actually, it's the second best. Your shirt is the best. So go ahead and get technical. Go ahead and get technical.
Content these days.
So, but I mean, there were a lot of people who didn't drink at all, or that if they did, they only drank beer, and it tended to be small beer. And it is really hard to get drunk on 3 and 4% alcohol. It just is. Like, I think, like, technically, unless you're drinking like a stomach aching amount of liquid, like, you can't even really get drunk on stuff that's under 2%. So
I'm sure they've done it in Texas. Those people drink beer by the case. It's crazy. Like, everybody gets their own case of beer. It's astonishing.
Yeah, stomach aching. But because your liver just works. But anyway, but people would binge drink, and so they would go out, they would do the manual labor, and then they would just get shit faced for 24 hours. Is kind of what would happen. But yeah, people were drinking kind of low alcohol stuff anywhere that you had sort of cultivated starches. Whether it was potato beer, wheat beer, barley beer, rice beer, millet beer. Yeah.
And also, they were fucked up on a lot of other stuff. So they had stimulants to get them through their day. I mean, hominids love our drugs. And I mean, every single Neanderthal burial we've found has ephedra. And like, people have been trying to get caffeine in their systems as long as we have had caffeine. So, because there's been tea, the coffee, like, all of them were like the crop when they came out. And again, Greta can speak more to that, but like, it's wild. Like, and even they found cocaine trace cocaine in mummies. They're thinking the mummies are contaminated, but you think it's people were blowing lines of mummies in the 19th century? It's possible. They did a lot of coke.
When I dug deeper into it, they're finding a trace chemical that could possibly be a byproduct of cocaine degrading, which is very different than finding cocaine.
Oh, yeah, that is. A metabolite is.
I thought it might have been the archaeologist was doing lines off the mummies, and then he's like, oh, no, we found it in there. When he got caught.
Amazing.
That was the era of Freud, so they were doing mountains of blow back then.
Are you seasick? Are you depressed? Are you a woman?
Do you have a cough? Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of caffeine and stimulants, that leads me on to my next question, which, coffee is the darling of our civilization, and particularly bodybuilders with their pre-workouts. But, Crotty, I don't know, is it right that coffee's been credited for being the driver of history and gave birth to enlightened Western civilization, as they always tout it to be? Is that, I don't even know coffee's origin story. It kind of, this whole food history rabbit hole has got me sort of thinking, I don't even know how it was developed and what role it played in developing civilization.
Well, it is originally East African. There's like this whole apocryphal story about this. Oh, this guy was out and he saw his goats eating something and they got all perky, and that's where coffee came from.
That's the origin story for every fucking herb that there is, especially horny goat weed. I mean, as we all know.
Yeah. But that's largely bullshit. Like, it's just sort of one of these things that, hunter-gatherer societies would go out and they would experiment with new plants. And so you can actually eat the cherry around the coffee seed, but, people in those days were testing out every part of every plant, because there's edible plants and then there's palatable plants. There's a lot of stuff we can eat that tastes like shit. So they're always looking for something that's tasty, and you can actually make some pretty tasty stuff out of coffees. And it turns out, okay, the coffee beans, they're good roasted, but yeah, then they also keep you awake. So they spread around East Africa in a lot of the religious houses, partly the old Christianity, but also partly Islam, and then just also the traditional religions that were there before Christianity, and then Islam later. Because again, in religious institutions, religious houses, you got a bunch of people who want to stay up and pray for these like super long ceremonies. So that seems to be kind of how coffee developed into a trade item and a saleable item and everything. So anyway, it spread all over like East Africa and then into North Africa and became this great trade good. And then the Ottoman Empire decided to invade Austria, and the Austrian army like attacked them, and the whole Ottoman army right away left everything behind, including these bags of coffee. And people are like, what's this? You know, and these beautiful coffee services. And so they're sort of like figuring out how to, and like, wow, shit, this keeps us awake. This is great. And so the whole contention that coffee is like responsible for the birth of civilization, sort of, but the big change it made is it was a fun thing to get together and drink with your buds, just like beer and wine and brandy, but you remembered what the fuck you said.
Exactly. And the first coffee house culture that I know of was the 1500s in Britain. They had a legit, like, it was like Starbucks coffee house culture, because they had a very liberal 100 years or so, and then all that went away. But
there was another version of it in Austria where they like snagged the Ottoman coffee, but Britain gets a lot of it because they had like a specific coffee house thing.
But that is a very Western centric view, because in the rest of the world they drink something that is much more caffeinated, or in the United States they drank the black drink. It's Ilex vomitoria, and
it's related to the holly bush.
There you go. And it's crazy caffeinated. The stuff they drank, I mean, this was a communal drink, but it had 3 to 5 grams of caffeine per serving that they made. So
I get a headache hearing that.
They were fired up. They were fired up.
How come coffee didn't really take off in Asia then at the same time?
Because of tea. That's what I was alluding to. Because Greta loves tea, and green tea, as she loves to remind everyone, has more caffeine than coffee.
On a per weight basis. That's why, like the amount of coffee you put into your coffee maker to make a cup of coffee is very different than the amount of like tiny little like teaspoon of tea leaves you would use to make a cup of tea. No, they didn't need coffee. They had tea. Yeah.
And the Japanese were micronizing their tea with a mortar and pestle. So like we're talking about like our micronized pre-workout. That's what they were doing with their tea. Getting it ground up and then getting out there and karateing the shit out of each other. So like,
What kind of people are going to come at you for that one?
Well, I picture everybody in Japan that like as that one-eyed kid in Smoking Aces who's just like doing a shitload of karate because he's all fucked up on Adderall and like trying to punch a guy in the face. Like that's Japan.
So besides coffee and
Greta, Tom Hiddleston, the guy from Shogun, is that his name? The Ajin-san.
Cosmo Jarvis.
The Cosmo Jarvis. Yeah, I had his name entirely wrong, but I know him, and I knew him from Upgrade, which is a movie you will never watch, but this man's acting in it was amazing.
Right.
He has a chip implanted in his head. He's a quadriplegic, and he has a chip implanted in his head that it's AI that allows him to move his arms and his legs. So he fights like a robot in this thing. So he goes from like loose and gangly to beating the shit out of people like a robot and then going, holy fuck, what are you doing to these people as he's bashing them? It's amazing. It's way too squishy.
It's actually one of the better sci-fi movies if you want to check it out, because I enjoyed it as well.
There's a lot of squishing noises though, because he crunches a lot of people's bones. But oh my god, he's so like I'm like this guy's range is amazing. Plus, I never realized he was British.
It's funny how you made the Tom Hardy connection between him as well, because I always sort of thought, this guy, I just can't get Tom Hardy out of my head when I look at him. So,
he's like a more fun version of Tom Hardy. Takes himself less seriously.
Besides coffee and salt, were there any other foods that really impacted the development or the shaping or affecting civilization in a way like those two things did?
Sugar.
Of course.
Sugar. There would be no United States if it wasn't for sugar.
I thought you were going to say cod for one moment.
Yeah, no. Sugar.
We're the United States of corn, not the United States of sugar, because it's high fructose corn syrup. Fuck that sugar.
No, but I'm just saying, like, they never would have like gotten interested in like having a place to like plant more stuff.
Yeah. No, we do love sugar. I was just quibbling. I was just.
But yeah, and you think about like honey / sugar, sweet stuff. Big like this goes back to our poor depressed I don't like food bodybuilders, but I have to eat, so I guess I'll do it in the saddest way possible. But like honey and sugar have always been a big part of like celebrations and religious festivals, and like it's always been something that's brought people together, and it's always been this like source of comfort and happiness. And just like, hey, we're together, let's make something nice. And one of the nice things people tended to make and bring out for a big party was something sweet. And then later on, it became sort of this whole thing about like, you know, wealth generation, but also without sugar, no booze. And one of the cheapest distilled drinks to make was rum, because it was developed from the industrial waste produced by making sugar. They're like, this molasses, God, just dumping it out in the coral reefs. It's such a pain in my ass. It's attracting all the rats. They're like, or
instead of killing the coral reefs, we have this other plan.
Yeah. And so a lot of the enslaved workers from Africa were used to making like millet beer and sorghum beer from stuff that was sweet already. And so they were making molasses beer. It tasted like shit. But if you're a slave on a sugar plantation, you just want to get wasted. So they're like, oh, wait, and we make whiskey by distilling beer functionally. So what if we distill this terrible beer made out of rum or out of molasses, and now we have rum.
One time distilled. My God. So that means nothing to you, Sean, but I just like, so the worst bum liquor you could buy in a store right now is 3 times distilled. And that shit the next day, the hair on your arm hurts. I mean, every bit of the hair on your body hurts the next day because the hangover is so fucking bad. And it doesn't matter how much you drink. It will leave you so hungover you want to fucking die. And it feels like electricity is shooting out of your skin. And this was 1 time distilled. It was at least 3 times worse. Tell me why.
I can tell you why. I can tell you why it makes you feel so shitty. Is because when you make alcohol by fermenting stuff, it's not just making alcohol, and all the little yeasties and cells in there doing their fermenty jobs are producing some other stuff. And so when you're distilling, you're concentrating all of these like really volatile, tiny little chemicals. And so if you only distill once, you have all the chemicals. You distill at least one more time, and you don't take the front part and you don't take the bad part. You just take the middle good part.
And there's a step worse than that, though. And that's where America was living for a while. And that was freeze distilled. So they would take like cider, right? And they would leave it outside in the winter. And then they would just pull the chunk of ice off. And so that was like the dumbest way to distill something ever. Because it also compacts the amount of impurities that you have in it too, right?
Congeners, yes. Yeah. So you're not taking any of the hangover stuff out. It's just all in there getting concentrated as you take the chunks of ice out. Because water freezes at a higher temperature than alcohol freezes. It has to get even colder for the alcohol to freeze.
And God knows what you guys were drinking in Australia. God only knows. Because you guys, I mean, you guys were the America part too, because when we were like, we're free now, stop dropping your fucking prisoners here. Then they started going to you guys. So that's how Australia was born.
We definitely got the best of the worst down here, if our present day society is anything to go by. I remember, Jamie, you wrote in your article series one time that America in the 1900s was the culinary equivalent to Epstein's Rape Island. If you've never heard of that.
I'm not familiar with that piece of work.
I just had to drop that one in there.
But, I didn't even recall writing that, but that's quite something. You know what? I have a word.
I've collected all the gems over the years, mate. Don't worry.
So is it just like the going out and stealing and being like, and now we will pervert this great idea into something simple that we can sell?
Oh no, it was because Americans ate so fast and our food was so bad, but in such great quantities that it was like people were disgusted. People from other countries were disgusted by us because of our eating habits. And that's more of what I was talking about.
Okay. I mean, and part of this, like, Americans are just disgusting and they eat and they talk with the mouthful. I mean, that was partly like elitism. Like, can't you even hold a civilized conversation? Like, God. So it was partly being snobs about it. But yeah, there definitely was this American thing where, like, I'm a rough and tumble, simple man. I like my steaks burnt and just salted. And yeah, they're like,
yeah, throughout the article series, Jamie had some very choice quotes from Europeans that were just fixated on the distaste that the Europeans had for Americans back then. And it was funny because this article that I read about Sandow's eating habits the other day on a prominent physical culture blog, one of the quotes that really kind of got me, I had to raise an eyebrow about. He said, granted, food quality was perhaps better during Sandow's time than it is today. But I'm wondering if we took a time machine back to, say, like England or Europe, where Sandow was most active in the 19th century or the late 1800s, what would it be like to compete in a weightlifting competition back then in terms of your eating or your food? Maybe you could speak to even like the food, the clothes, the transportation, if you like.
I mean, first of all, how you ate totally depended where you were in the income bracket. If you were somewhere rural and had a pretty good farm with a lot of employees and you were sort of like, one of your goals was making sure you had plenty of food, everybody was strong, you actually ate, better than people eat now, because they were eating seasonally. They were eating just like right there. You know, the peas on your plate were in the kitchen garden that afternoon. You know, fresh chicken, fresh pork, fresh whatever. But if you were a poor person in a city, life sucked. You were eating stale bread and like weird grease scooped off the top of a stew pot and salted meat that was maybe beef, pork, I don't
know. Any of the above.
Oh, and they didn't put out produce until it was already ripe. So which meant that all the produce was rotten all the fucking time. And poor people got the
No, I mean, because everybody went shopping once, like every single day. And so, yes, poor people got the stuff.
Poor people ate rotten food all the time.
Yeah. I'm saying, like, if you had money to pay for stuff, no, you got like fresh stuff because it was like coming in that day or the day before. And so, yeah, they would just put it out when it was ready to go. But yeah, poor people are eating.
But then it would be bad the next day.
Well, why would you keep it? You bought it to eat today.
Yeah, and these goddamn poors are out there eating all our food.
One of the things that actually surprised me about the Sandow eating article is that they said that he didn't really indulge in a lot of food. So his caloric intake for the day wasn't huge by any means, and he didn't really ingest a lot of protein. So he was kind of getting his protein from the oysters, a bit of nuts, fruits, vegetables, little bit of milk and eggs, but George Hackenschmidt was much the same. These guys weren't prodigious eaters, and they just sort of espoused the whole moderation byline. So that was quite.
I do need to just interject. George Hackenschmidt started that moderation thing in his retirement, and he was very clear about that. He ate a ton before he retired, and he actually had a bunch of quotes about how the Japanese are all tiny, angry little people because they don't eat enough. And he was like, their food's terrible and they fucking don't eat enough, and that's why they're like that. And so, like, he was like, you got to eat a lot if you want to be a big, strong guy. But he was also from Russia, where they ate, like, Russian peasants ate more than almost anybody on the planet in the 19th century, because they like, for a while, they had no money and their food was not tasty, but they had lots of it. So, but being a serf required a lot of calories in order to just survive.
Yeah, and the Japanese, very fully Japanese under standards. They didn't have any bones to pick with the Japanese.
Well, I mean, they did have the sumo culture, and chanko nabe, a stew, is the source of their strength, and they do carry more muscle than any like professional bodybuilders. So, like, underneath that subcutaneous fat. So
yeah. So do you have any time for some audience questions just really quickly, Greta?
Sure.
Because we've just passed an hour, so a few people have submitted a couple of questions and I thought they were quite interesting. So this may be a question to you both. What's a simple and nutrient-rich food that's no longer commonly served but should make a comeback?
I would just say the offcuts of animals, like get your damn pressure cooker. But and then also just the variety of vegetables that are out there. Like there's this obsession with like protein, but there's a lot of plant foods that are out there that are really like nutritious, important, easy to store, like dried beans and pulses. There is a universe of them out there. Super easy to store. They cook up really easily. They taste delicious. Get back on.
Yeah, you guys don't eat a lot of organ meats up there, do you? You don't get into the liver, the brains, the hearts, the kidneys.
No.
I love them.
Because here they were seen as like, oh, well, the poor people eat that stuff. So we really did get obsessed with like steaks. And then also, you know, cooking all of that stuff takes a lot of skill. And people who were living somewhere where they were good cooks and had a steady job being a cook and just had like all of that training, it didn't come over here.
Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, I didn't have tripe until I went to China. Like that was, I think, the first offal I ever had in my entire life was that. No, my dad ate liver and onions. I think mostly to troll us when we were kids, but it was kind of like shit on a shingle. He was like, "Here, eat this," and I was like, "You just called it shit on a shingle. I don't think I want to." And he was like, "Just eat it," and it was terrible. And you know, and I was kind of like liver and onions.
That's because it was prepared terribly.
Yes, because I have figured out how to make delicious.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely a taste adaptation when it comes to eating organ meats, because at the first few bites now you don't like them, and then once you start to integrate them into your other foods, they become seamless and they actually add a taste and texture that becomes really enjoyable after a while.
God bless you. I tried with liver. Oh my God, I ruined so much chili with liver, trying to hide it and like in increasingly smaller pieces and like minute amounts, and it just poisoned chili.
Have you ever tried soaking it in salt water first?
I have not.
Because there are a lot of, like, this is one of those skill things. Like, a lot of these organ meats have these really strong flavors, or like bone marrow or heart and everything, particularly myoglobin, but there's some other stuff that it just does. It has this really strong flavor. And so a lot of the places that eat tripe and heart and kidneys and whatever, they go through this cleansing process where they soak it in salt water through a couple of rinses.
Okay.
Changes the game.
So that's as essential as taking the silver off your ribs. Okay. And that's something people don't know, but guys don't know that you've got to strip the silver off the back of the ribs, or else you can't get the fucking meat off the bone. But yeah. Yep.
The secret that I've discovered to developing a taste for foods that you don't otherwise like, say liver or organ meats, which are good for you as well, broths. I used to hate soup. I could never stomach it. But when you're in a really severe caloric deprivation,
soup, like all soups, every soup.
The smell of it as a child used to make me like vomit. So I used to have to go to that dinner because my parents would never serve me anything else. And we were poor as shit, so we got soup on the menu quite often. But
so you just got
now soup's one of my favorite foods, simply because when I was dieting and going on such very low calorie diets, everything starts to taste really nice. So if you have a little bit of liver, you know, it's the best liver you've ever tasted in the world. Or if you have some like soup broth, it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then it becomes part of your food arsenal in the future because you remember it, you know, as being such a favorable taste when you were starving. So that's one of my secrets. I noticed that like so many men are celebrity chefs these days, but was there ever a culture where men did the majority of the food preparation in deference to the women?
No. There are definitely cultures where men prepare certain foods and women prepare certain foods, but it's just a fact of life that being pregnant and raising children means you want to be somewhere where there's a place of warmth and a place of safety. And so food preparation goes with, you know, home. And so women were just sort of generally more about the gathering part, the food storage, the food prep, and the childcare. Now, there were certainly men who were like, I'm just never going to be a hunter and I'm going to hang out with the childcare crowd. And there were plenty of women who were like, this baby shit ain't for me. I want to get out there with a spear. So, but and there are definitely some foods in some cultures like that's man food, and then there's the women food. But no, as far as I know, there was never a culture where the women were all out doing the catching and the men were all in doing the food prep.
Well, at least in the cultures that I've read, women caught small game constantly, and that was totally the primary protein source. So where we have this thought that like the men were going and getting all the protein and the women were just like fucking making salads, that's not what was happening.
No.
Although like we know about rabbit starvation because women were catching the fucking rabbits. And like so like the entire conception of hunter-gatherer societies is malformed. It's like a 19th century concept we need to get rid of because it's stupid. It's like it would be like treating people before the internet as different human beings. You know what I mean? It's just, it doesn't make any sense. And also, it's treating all those people as a monolithic culture doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
We always hear about eating your fruit and vegetables these days, the importance of doing so. But are the modern day versions of fruit and vegetables a little bit more of an adulterated, maybe compromised version of what they once were in their natural stage?
Yes, because they have to fucking travel. I mean, it used to be you ate what was in season, you ate what was local, you might do some drying, and then when canning and putting stuff in jars came in, that would preserve the harvest for longer. But people used to breed stuff for what tastes the best. But now it's like what will survive the trip. And so like when I started seeing fresh strawberries in Christmas recipes, what the fuck are we doing? Like, actually, I'm sure fresh strawberries in Australian Christmas make sense. But
yeah, pavlova all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll be a strawberry as big as your fist that'll look delicious and have zero flavor.
Have you ever tried pavlova? That's like our national cake.
Yeah. Delicious.
What is it?
But that's more of an August thing. Oh, it's a like a meringue and cream and piles of delicious fruit.
We credited it as ours, but we actually stole it from the Kiwis, the New Zealanders next door, but we steal everything from them, including most of their acting talent. Anything good comes from New Zealand, we just claim it.
There you go. So Peter Jackson is yours then?
Yeah, I guess so. Add him to the list.
The Hobbits are ours. You get Mad Max and the Hobbits.
But yeah, no, we have definitely changed all of our fruit, not all of them, but the majority of our fruits and vegetables to stuff that grows in standardized ways, stuff that travels well, stuff that like is the right size for the jar. And there's just like this galaxy of delicious foods out there that only grow well in limited conditions. Like the tragedy of the peach for me, like I stopped eating peaches there for a while because I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. We have a huge stone fruit culture out here. And every time I would buy a peach or a nectarine, I'd be just like, well,
and your family's from down south, so you're like in Georgia eating peaches, like old school.
I was never there during peach season, really, but yeah, just everything was terrible. And at one point, I was like, well, if it doesn't, like, I did learn enough that like if you pick up most fruits that have a smell, if you don't smell the smell, it's never going to be properly ripe. Like it might soften, but it's not going to be like fully developed ripe. And they're picking all of these fruits so green, so it it can travel that way. So I'm at this grocery store one time and I pick up this peach and I'm like, well, it's a little hard, but it smells. Wait a second. They were putting little packets of scent around the peach display so you couldn't tell if the peaches smelled like a peach.
Wow.
Like,
strange. Motherfucker. So I went to a farmer's market that I knew like had just like local stuff, and I was like, I just want a real good peach. And I'm like, pick me out one because these people would know. And she's like here. And I was like, I do still like peaches. I just don't like these bullshit picked green, traveled across the country peaches.
You got to get that good farmer's market peach.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And even then, you have to be careful.
What's the strangest or most exotic food you ever tried that everybody else should try?
That everybody else should try, huh?
At least once.
I actually, the most surprising thing, I was like, wait, this is good. So I help out a butchery every year now. It's like a pig slaughter event. And so they started making basically like pig haggis. It was a sausage inside the stomach, and they would smoke it. And I was like, oh my God, this is delicious. But when you sort of realize that the stomach is just like a sausage casing and what really matters is the sausage you stuff inside, it can be either terrible because people don't know what the fuck they're doing, or it can be one of the most delicious things you've ever had. So there you go.
How about you, Jamie?
I think fried grasshoppers and ants. I'm not a huge fan of eating like weird shit just to eat it, but ants are very citrusy and they're actually very tasty. And a fried grasshopper was just like crunchy. So when you see like, because occasionally you'll see pictures of people frying up like grasshoppers in a big wok in Southeast Asia, and people will just walk down the street and eat them, which is amazing protein for you. But it's basically like eating popcorn. They used to do it with baby birds back in the day too, apparently, or little tiny birds. They were just credits. Because I was like, what the fuck are they eating? And she was like, birds with the feathers on, just tiny birds. Just
yeah. Speaking of that point, have you ever tried balut?
Warriors,
Filipinos.
Did I misunderstand that?
Oh,
balut?
No, not
have you tried
necessarily
balut?
with the feathers, but yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, no, I have never tried balut. I do know a place in Seattle where you can get it. It's a seasonal delicacy.
What is balut? Oh, is that whale whatever?
No, it
This is worse.
duck eggs, where the little baby duck has partially matured, but not all the way. And
it's the Filipino specialty dish of their country. They used to love it over there when I was there.
Oh my God.
Just the visual of it just disgusts me.
Even when you get an egg with a blood spot in it, and I'm like, what? No, I don't want to see that.
It started out as you can only have so many ducks, and otherwise, like, you just can't handle them all, and like, you don't fucking waste eggs. And
yeah, duck shit must be a real problem, because I mean, my God, we had duck ponds near where I grew up, and you couldn't walk anywhere. There was just duck shit everywhere. So yeah, that would be terrible.
That's improper management. That is great fertilizer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Another question asked, why did cheese take off in Europe but not so much in Asia?
Oh, geography.
Oh, Gunstorm Steel raises its ugly head.
Well, but basically, I mean, you had herding cultures, and it's just sort of like in a lot of Europe and the British Isles and everything, the herding was like much smaller ranges. And then you also just had the weather. It was cooler, and you had caves. People had caves to put the cheese in. But if you're in the Middle East, it's hot. So like, you don't have a place to age the cheese. So they would make like drained yogurt, like labna and stuff. And so that was cheesy, but it was just too hot to sort of like properly age cheese. So they would even make like this salted preserved yogurt. So, but they just didn't have a good thing for it. Or if you look at the Mongol culture they would have some yogurt. So, and why not cheese? My personal thought on that one is they didn't have grain or fruit for beer. So they're like, I could make cheese, or I can make booze.
And they were making their milk into booze too. So yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
They made kumis instead of cheese.
Yep. Yeah.
Like, while I love cheese, if I had to either have only cheese or only booze, I might go with only booze.
Yeah. Let's get drunk. Well, and also in certain cultures like Japan, they had something that would act as cheese but wasn't cheese. They had a fermented soy thing. What was that called again?
You mean
that was real stringy?
tofu? Oh
no, the really stringy thing that Anjan natto. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So
that's disgusting. I hate that.
The cheesy funk. Yeah. But yeah, tofu acted as a curded substance that added protein and was fairly storable.
I think something in the mind of most bodybuilders is the future of meat versus lab-grown meat versus plant meat. Where do you see that going?
We got to do it.
Yes.
But the thing is, I think we should still continue to raise animals for meat, but use that meat as like special event. Like it used to be, people would get together for a communal meal and eating meat was a big deal. And I don't have a problem with that. But most people just want, I want some protein, I want some chicken nuggets. Like they don't care where the fuck the meat came from. And so I think lab-grown meat and plant-based meat is a great solution for that. It helps with the whole cold chain thing. It helps with the agricultural waste, you know, and for people who are looking for leaner meats, like lab-grown meat is entirely lean. And so,
although it's banned in Florida now.
And NASA will be like, well, we're moving. And
Yeah,
like, oh,
yeah.
sorry, it's okay. Like,
What's happening in Florida at the moment?
Oh, they banned lab-grown meat.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Yeah, we can't.
Oh,
we won't be able to go to space without functionally lab-grown meat. Food replication from like basic stuff of some variety is going to have to happen if we're going to do long-term space travel.
we got 3D printers. It's only, I mean, it seems like it's going to be a small step to 3D printing food, right?
It's a very big, small step. There's a lot of problems to work out.
Theoretically,
we're
at Jetsons level already. We didn't think we were going to be here. We didn't think we were going to see flying cars, but we're damn near there.
I've always wondered whether they would eventually cultivate food or grow plants and stuff on the moon. Do you think that's ever a possibility?
It's totally a possibility. It's just sort of like getting the nutrient cycling right, for sure.
But why would you?
But mining. I mean, do you know how much aluminum is on the moon?
I don't. Is there a lot?
Fuck ton, yes.
Oh, okay.
It's all combined with oxygen, but yeah.
Gotcha. Well, there you go.
Yeah, like speaking of the future, we all thought that when we were kids, you know, we'd eventually be growing up to be like the Jetsons, where all our food would be ingested in the shape of, you know, the size of a pill. But what kind of futuristic developments do you see in terms of food culture, food supply? Are we going to be doing like large scale insect farming as a major source of food in the near future, or what other developments do you see?
God, I don't know. I'm all food past. Why are you asking me about the future, James? But like for insect farming, I mean, people around the world have eaten insects in one form or another, like on and on and on. And shrimp, hello, it's a bug, basically.
So are lobsters. They're roaches. They're the roaches of the ocean.
But I do think like bug farming for protein supplements, I really feel like that's going to be a soy flour kind of situation. Like for a long time, it's going to be a generational thing. But I feel like that's a great way, again, to get protein into mixtures. Like your chicken nuggets may be plant-based, but then they're supplemented with bug protein. Because again, just you get the recipe right, a little fried nugget of popcorn cricket, I don't know. Like people, like, do you honestly think those Jack in the Box popcorn chickens are in any way, shape, or form like superior to like some plant-based protein stuff? Like, it doesn't have to be chicken.
I think they've banned Jack in the Box down here simply for that reason. But...
And you know what? Like while we're talking about protein, the myth that we need all this protein was sold to us by the dairy industry, who were trying to offload their fucking waste product of whey onto us. Whey is a waste product of the cheese making process, and they literally just foisted it upon us, and we're like, you need more of this, goddammit, America, steak and eggs and whey protein, do it. And we fucking bought it, and I feel like a jackass.
Well, I mean, it started in sort of the 19th century when we sort of identified chemical compounds and we're like, oh, protein's the thing that we need. And it was a classist thing. Like, look at all these puny people, you know, who are poor. It's because they don't get enough meat. It's like, or they're starving. I don't know. And so like the whole you need protein thing it's been with us ever since cows became a crop, I think.
Yeah. And so the idea that So what you're saying is the idea that we need a ton of protein comes from the same exact time that gave us the diet that was chew your food 1,000 times and it'll turn to ash in your stomach.
Oh God, who were? I mean, it was related to Kellogg, but what did he call it? It was
Electrism.
Yes, thank you.
Food. Yes. But on that note, I'm about to piss my pants, so we're gonna have to wrap this up.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I really want to thank you both for coming on the channel again today. Greta, it's been great having you alongside Jamie because usually it's just me and him. So we'd love to have you again sometime. We could perhaps maybe field some questions live from the audience because we do these things like at the same time every week. So if you ever wanted to come back on, you're more than welcome. But you're a fantastic font of knowledge. And again, I really recommend people to check out the Prize Fighters, Circus Freaks, and Gangsters. If you want more of Jamie and Greta together.
Oh, and the history of American food. Greta's other
that was my next one.
Podcast. It's so fucking good. It's so good.
Yeah. Do you have any books or anything in the works yourself that you're working on, or a website that people can visit too, or are you on socials at all?
Oh, I'm all over the socials as at THOA Food, so the history of American food, and I pop up in different places, somewhat snarky. My podcast, just in case you have children in your life, is very E for everyone. So you can play it in front of your mother or your grandma, and you're fine. But yeah, I show up with guys like Jamie, and I end up swearing. Like I had to go through all of my middle school teaching with no swears for like decades. So I'm ready.
We're all making up for lost time in that regard. Thanks once again, guys, and support these guys on their socials. And I just want to thank you again. Cheers for coming.
Oh, I had a great time.
Thank you so much for coming on.
I would come back.
Awesome. Thanks again, guys.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks.